Schoolhouse Rock was a great show. Have you ever watched Schoolhouse Rock? But it was basically a cartoon mini film series that was an animated shorts that were musical that explained, topics to children. So sometimes they would explain, Conjunction Junction was a song about conjunctions, framed from the idea of a conductor, of a train. How a bill becomes a law. They had one about adverbs and adjectives. And I bring that up to say this. Conjunction Junction did the world a disservice when they decided to never make a series of episodes and music videos about the Bill of Rights, because functionally, no one seems to understand what the First Amendment is. And when I say no one, I mean everyone from liberal think piece hack writers for New York Times or Washington Post to the ACLU. And apparently no one knows what the First Amendment is anymore. And I feel like I'm in an awkward place because I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but I can read at a second grade level. And so I understand what the First Amendment is. It basically says the government will not infringe upon the free speech of any individual. Am I forgetting something? I mean, that's what the part I'm talking about, the free speech part, not necessarily freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom of the protest. That's the gist of what free speech is. The government will not impinge upon anyone's right to free speech.
Well, I don't think it's that they don't know what it is. I think that they conveniently leave that out to make their whatever point they're trying to make at the time. And they try to frame it in terms of the First Amendment, even though they know it's wrong. Because I do think that most people, especially journalists, are aware of the kind of lane that the First Amendment covers. And I think that they're aware when they use it incorrectly.
So my point is this, right? My point was that just as the spring gives way to summer and summer gives way to fall, Richard Spencer has been punched in the face again recently, banned from a campus, and similarly another white supremacist, Ann Coulter, was again had her speech canceled at a campus due to protests and fear of riots. And I'm just sitting here expecting a wave of liberal writers musing about how the discourse is dead. But I'll tell you something, discourse is right here, baby. I got the discourse for you.
Shut up. That was the worst one.
How lamenting how freedom of speech is dying on college campuses and the discourse is dead. And it's just what about these bastions of liberal ideals as they refer to engaging each other in spirited debate. And defending Richard Spencer defending Richard Spencer's right to have a platform at a private institution is not a matter of free speech, and it is in no way rooted solely in liberalism, right? Because if it was rooted solely in liberalism, people would be advocating for people to bring, Reverend Jeremiah Wright to campus. The same people who were, whining, even though they don't quote unquote agree with Ann Coulter, that Ann Coulter's speech got canceled at Berkeley, would also be whining about the fact that, hey, Berkeley also canceled a class on Palestine at Berkeley. I mean, at the school recently. They would be complaining about those things. This desire to defend Richard Spencer and Milo and Ann Coulter and McInnes and David Duke that exists in these liberal hacks is entirely rooted in white supremacy. That's what
Absolutely.
it is. Go ahead.
It's literally there. It's a way to participate in white supremacy without feeling like you're being a white supremacist. It's a way to participate and keep that privilege intact by saying, I don't agree with what you say, but I'll fight to the death for your right to say it. A lot of times, the right for these people to say it means that some of us will die if they get their way. It's not people. It bothers me. I can't even formulate the words to talk about it because I'm just so.
They will not fight for your right. They will not fight to death for your right to say anything. And that's why I say this is not rooted in liberalism. This is not rooted in the freedom of speech. These people are not freedom of speech absolutists. They're not freedom of speech advocates. What they are is they're white supremacist apologists. And what that means is that they have internalized the hegemonic notions surrounding white supremacy and misogyny and transphobia and all these things. And they will actively advocate for people to go out and speak whether it be Milo, who has outed trans people in public, or called people for people to call immigration services if they believe that they're, anyone they know is a legal immigrant. Ann Coulter, who has said equally awful things. Charles Murray, the purveyor of pseudo-racist science, they will defend their right to speak, because despite the fact that those people's ideas are dangerous, and if they're not entirely violent, because there seems to be some disagreement over, well, can speech be violent?
Yes.
Listen, I'm not going to sit here and have a
If rap lyrics can get you in jail, bro, speech can be violent.
I'm going to sit here and have a sociology or philosophy 101 jerk-off session with some liberal writer about whether literal words can hurt you. But here's the thing: they can certainly be the predicate for violence. Like, people like Charles Murray can certainly provide, a pseudo-scientific justification for eugenics or social and structural inequality that prevents people from getting help, or prevents, legislation from passing that might save people's lives. In that way, it's a justification for violence. But whatever, they're not going to defend those same people as, again, white genocide professor George Sakaro Marr, shout out to George Sakaro Marr if he's watching, is going through an issue where Drexel is trying to fire him right now. And those exact same people, and I'm going to shout them out too. Most, honestly, two of them, Lee Fong and Zed Jelani, but it's really Lee Fong, who works at The Intercept, was for days going on tirades about how Milo being deplatformed, freedom of speech, he's going to get so many followers. Oh my God, deplatforming, how could you? He didn't fix his mouth up to defend George Sicario. In fact, he went out there actively demonizing him, calling him he makes up fables. And so really what we're seeing here is these people who claim to have this rooted vested interest in defending liberalism, they're just defending white supremacy. They don't think they are, because then that's what comes down to being socialized in a white supremacist society. But they believe that it's everyone's job to constantly be debating and allowing space for white supremacists. They don't believe that society should ever move forward to the point at which we're no longer required, as Black people, as brown people, as trans people, as LGBTQ people of any sort, as women, to debate our right to not only exist, but to exist without being harassed, without having some kind of biological essentialist argument existing in our spaces, as to why we don't deserve to be equal. They think we should still have to do that literally 40 years later. These liberals want us on the back of goddamn trucks. They want us on the back of trucks because they think we should still have to debate Nazism. Not even just like alt-right. They want us to still debate Nazism after we went through a world war over it, because that is how deeply ingrained white supremacy is in our society. And really, that's how deeply white supremacy, because since liberals don't actually engage consciously with the notion of white supremacy, that's how deeply white supremacy is entrenched in modern liberal ideology. Like, they just don't recognize that people should not actually have to engage in civilized debate over their right to exist, and that, honestly, free speech is really just politeness. It's reckless centrism. It's reckless civility. It's polite. It's a very shallow definition of both violence and politeness. It's not polite to question as to whether Black people should be allowed to even exist in society, or whether they should be victims of the genocide. Like, it's impolite to demand that person not be allowed to speak on campus. And I'm gonna open this up one time. I will say this: college Republicans are the worst combination of college students and Republicans. They exist only to piss people off and be needlessly recalcitrant and obtuse. But really, the institutions and the goddamn administration should know better than to bring Ann Coulter on campus. They should know better than to bring Richard Spencer on campus. But I don't know what they're thinking. Sorry, I went on a rant. Go ahead.
Let me interject with what you just said, as if to underline the point you're making. Berkeley did decide to reschedule Ann Coulter for May 2nd. So she is going to be able to speak there on May 2nd. Now, the young Republicans there are complaining about the changed date, and also about the time of day they're asking her to speak. So they still are pissed off. And apparently she's still saying she may come on the original date anyway. So just to underline your point about the young Republicans being just contrarian idiots, that kind of I don't know, they kind of made your point for you there.
I mean, one of the things that I really I hesitate to say I enjoy because I don't actually mean it, but I do enjoy when a lot of these folks, argue for Richard Spencer's right to talk, for every Nazi ever to have, like, well, if you can't debate with them, then you're no better than them. I'm sorry, but that's patently false. But a lot of times, I think that while that is stemmed in white supremacy, a lot of these folks, I feel, live vicariously through people who do say these things that they consider to be politically incorrect. They live vicariously through rap music. Rap music, when an artist says the word nigger, they live vicariously through the white person who says, the white supremacist who says things that are racist, that are sexist, that are homophobic, that they feel that they cannot say in their everyday average life, regardless of whether you realize it or not. Like, that's just one of those things. It's almost appealing to them. It's this kind of, you stare into the void long enough and it stares back kind of mentality that, oh my gosh, I'm flirting with danger. They took
well, I think that
and now they feel that they're suddenly.
I think you've also hit on exactly what the Trump phenomenon is when they say that he could, when he said he can go into the street and shoot someone and people would still support him. I think that that's a big part of it, that he says these things, that he's so crass and sexist and racist right out in the open. And he still has a ton of money and a ton of respect and everything else, and they want to be like that. So I think that you just hit on just as a side note there.
And it highlights the absurdity of the strategy of the tax march and pointing out something that everybody already knows about Trump, about how corrupt he is, or how he's using this office to personally enrich himself. But go ahead, Brandon.
Yeah, that's the thing I was gonna point to, right? Like, the idea of, like, the Democrats, or rather society, shot itself in the foot when they made, like, success in business or money or richness or whatever you want to call it, or I guess even opulence at this point, sign, what it should be is a sign of the moral decay of society. But the fact that one person could have so much while other people have so little, what they did was they made it synonymous with morality. And so you try to point to how much money that Trump has, and it's like, well, like, we've been taught our entire life that makes him a good person. Time you point to how much money Trump has and, like, his taxes aren't being paid, and oh my gosh, like, how bad is that? Like, at the same time, the Democratic Party elevates positions of leadership and spokesmanship. Mark Zuckerberg worship Apple. Apple doesn't pay any taxes. Have it both ways. Even when it comes down to critiquing Ivanka Trump and, like, about her nepotism, it's like, you can't do that and then seem like you're not completely out of your gourd when you want to worship Chelsea Clinton. And so, like, the Democratic, just society has positioned richness as literally being more like inherent. There's an inherent virtue in richness. And so pointing to the things that Trump did, whether it be sexism or misogyny or racism, he was able to make a compelling case that, well, I'm rich though. Person. And that's unfortunate, but that's really just the way our society is formatted. And as long as we remain, not only, as Nancy Pelosi said, capitalist, but as long as we remain a neoliberal society, that is going to stay. Like, we'll never be able to defeat oligarchs on the basis of morality or ethics, even if it's in the social field. As long as we make money, success in the capitalist system, an inherent sign of personal moral virtue. But I will say something to what the desire to debate Nazis. Yeah, I refuse to debate Nazis, or refuse to debate sexists, and refuse to debate racists like Charles Murray. And why you should not do that is it positions the act of debating them, the structure of a debate, the symbolism of a debate. It makes it seem as though their position is one of careful consideration, scientific research, nuance, intelligence, and it's anything but just bigotry. Rabid, shallow, I don't like people who are different than me, like bigotry. And that's why books like Charles Murray's The Bell Curve were so popular, because they basically provided a pseudo-scientific justification for inequality in both poor people, basically for poor people, but also for Black people, and sometimes for women. Like, it was that kind of pseudo-intellectual, pseudo-philosophical racist or misogynist or prejudiced person's wet dream. It was, hey, don't worry. Science says it's okay to hate these people because they are actually less intelligent. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm into science, right? If Charles Murray's book, I'm gonna go back and forth between like Charles Murray and Richard Spencer, and I'm gonna touch on punching Nazis in a second. Like, if Charles Murray's book was scientifically sound, I would say, you know what, we actually have to engage with this. Like, if his book was scientifically sound, but it's not even that sound scientifically. His analysis, his data, his conclusions, all bunk. They've been debunked. Like, so why do we still have to actively engage with it? Like, of course, because he's espousing white supremacy. If he was espousing any other position that was not like so hegemonic to society, like if he was espousing like some kind of radical science that was in favor of why women should be in positions of leadership, I don't know, able to like enslave men, or we wouldn't be on campus. But the fact that his position, the fact that his position uses science to legitimize racism is the exact reason why he's allowed to like still have relevancy. And I don't care what anyone says. The only reason you would ever invite Charles Murray on your campus is because of the bell curve. It's not because of anything else he wrote. It's because of the bell curve. That's the only reason he's famous. It's the only reason. There is no justification. And I want to go back to punching Nazis. So I'm going to be the lame-o here. I'm going to be the weenie. I'm actually against all forms of political violence. Maybe it's because I'm a sadomasochist. Maybe it's because I'm not. But I actually don't believe in random acts of political violence. But what I don't like is the fact that we have whatever. Okay, what I'm going to say is that
you call me a nigga and I hit you. That ain't random. That's cause and effect.
What I'm going to say is this. What I am not a fan of, though, is the fact that we have to engage in this moral panic, that liberals are demanding we engage in this moral panic where we have to pretend as though there is this trend, like ubiquity of Nazis being punched in our society. That's the majority or even a sizable minority of the political violence in our society, when really political violence in our society is limited to, as people's always limited to, women, people of color, religious minorities, various ethnic groups, and LGBTQ people. Like one Nazi got punched, and because liberals again are so white supremacy is so entrenched in liberal and modern liberal ideology that we had to have a national conversation about whether it was okay for the far left to engage in violent activism, even as members of the far left, or rather the people far left, try to empower our targets of not only interpersonal political violence, but structural violence, as the end result of the rampant racism in society. Like we had to stop and have a national conversation about punched, where we had theoretically smart liberal people going out there like, we can't have Nazis being punched. You have to fight fascism with words. And don't get me wrong, I think that's a legitimate position. I just don't think enough Nazis are being punched to warrant the conversation we're having about it. I wish we lived in a world. This is again, I will just double down. I will double down. I am not in favor of Nazis being punched randomly in the street, but I do say this: I wish the majority of political violence was happening against Nazis. I wish that the amount that we have to have a conversation about Nazis being punched was proportionate to the amount of Nazis actually being punched. But it's not. It's the world's dumbest moral panic.
And so let me tell you why you're wrong about all of this. Except for the First and foremost, if your entire political ideology hinges on the fact that you are somehow superior to everybody else on the planet, and that because of that certain people need to die, you deserve to get hit in the mouth. I don't care who you are. Just by virtue of existing at that point, you deserve to be hit in the mouth. End of story. If you're a Nazi, guess what? In this country, we have a very rich tradition called World War II, where we went over and we murked every single Nazi we saw. So let me catch you on the street, you little swastika and Doc Martens with the rest. I will sleep you on sight. I have zero problems hitting Nazis. I think every Nazi needs to be lined up. As far as I'm concerned, let me put my foot up behind of every single racist, and we will solve racism that way. Every single one of y'all just needs to line up and save this asshole. Every single, come see who's genetically superior now, Steve Bannon. Go ahead and sit your Jabba the Hutt looking self. You better sit down.
There's gonna have a dirty boot.
Yeah, right. And a tired leg.
I'm gonna say that they're not.
Never enough. There's too much complaining about hitting Nazis. Never enough hitting them. Sleep all of them.
Calm down, Captain America. What I was going to say is that what I don't like is this notion that liberals are at one side of their mouth saying, well, we can't normalize Trump. We can't normalize Trump. We can't normalize Trump. Like, but look how cute Richard Spencer is. Look how cute he is. Like he can't possibly be bad.
He can normalize these hands.
We're not only normalizing Nazis, but we are hyperinflating the amount of violence that is being done against them, which is worse than normalizing them. It's like they act as though hitting them is what's martyring them. Hitting Nazis is not what's martyring Nazis. The liberal media's obsession with this trend of alt-right and like the one or two Nazis being punched is what's martyring them. Like it is entirely disproportionate to the amount of violence. You want to stop people from saying
Richard Spencer looks cute? Knock out his front teeth. See how cute he looks there.
Like I know people who are out there defending Nazis are going to say to me, "Well, hey, I also talk about the hate crimes against Muslims, the hate crimes against women," and I'm like, "Yeah, you do, but the problem is the disproportionate amount which you talk about hate crimes against Nazis. If you do one tweet, if you do 100 tweets about Muslims being victims of hate crimes, for every one tweet you do about a Nazi being punched in the face, you are disproportionately representing Nazis being punched in the face because that's simply not a trend. It's an anomalous event, and they believe the hype. And again, I talked about this when I was talking about. When I introduced this topic. They can pretend.
Richard, let's let Katie get into it because we've been talking a lot.
We're going to end soon, actually. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, I didn't really have much. I was kind of just enjoying Adair's ranting there. That was a good Nazi rant. I'm in the middle of the two of you, I think, where I don't really have much of a problem with Nazis being the victim of violence, mostly because they advocate for other people to be the victims of violence based on nothing more than their skin color. And yeah, when you think that you're superior based on the amount of melanin in your skin, you might deserve a boot up your ass. I'm just saying.
So watching, it's fine.
Okay. I remembered what you say about cursing on the channel, so I had to stop myself, and then I cursed anyway. So
when did I stop?
Try to be modest.
But so what I was trying to say was that I actually am not in favor of just wholesale cold cocking your everyday random alt-right member on the street when he's not doing anything. And I think
we're all there. I think we're all there. Except I think that's Adair is alone on that one. But
well, are we talking alt-right or are we talking Nazis? Because there might be a difference.
I don't differentiate between those two because I'm not a
liberal. Nazis is a specific thing.
Watch what happens. Call me when I will find you, bro.
Here's what I'm going.
I think we run the gamut. I think we run the gamut pretty well of where we're at, where the Nazi punching goes. I think we got a little flavor.
We all have an opinion.
My only frustration is the amount of attention Nazi punching gets, as though this is something that is actually happening when it's not happening.
Well, I think part of that is that it was a kind of a funny story, and the picture was hilarious. And it was just this guy kind of getting his comeuppance. And then, of course, you have all of the liberal adults in the room that have to be all adult and adulting and, have to come in and make it out to be a really big problem. But I think it kind of got blown up because the picture and the headlines were so perfect. I mean, he just put it up on the screen. Look at that. That's hilarious.
It's got the White Lives Matter sign in the background just to give it some context.
And then it became even dumber with if you punch a Nazi, you become a Nazi, like some sort of weird werewolf curse, right?
I will literally walk around with the stereo blasting "Nuck if you buck" and hit every single Nazi I see in the mouth.
Nuck if you buck. Okay, so I want to end it around here because we've been going for about 75 minutes, and at this point it's over. But "Nuck if you buck" is perhaps the best fight song in the history of the universe. Like by Crime Mob. "Nuck If You Buck" is like the epitome of rap between the years of 2005 and 2008. Nuck If You Buck is so good that he should be taken away by Child Protective Services and given to Crime Mob to be raised in a real rap lifestyle. That's gonna be my final say of the night. Everyone say if you could die.
We should end it there.
Yeah, I don't think we can follow that. I mean,
no.
Go ahead. There you got it. Yeah. You shut it down, Brad. All right.
Yeah.